Hey, it's Margaret. Have you ever wanted to paint something from a photograph, but maybe the photograph is smaller than what you want your final painting to be? In this video, I want to teach you how to use the grid method to transfer or draw or trace that photograph onto the paper or canvas size that you would like. So all you need is whatever your image is, and it could even be an outline, which is what I'll use today. You'll need the paper or canvas that you're tracing it onto, a ruler, and hopefully if you have a T-square ruler, that makes your life a lot easier, and you'll need a pencil with an eraser. So join me here on the table and I'll show you how to do it. This is the drawing that I would like to transfer from this 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper onto a larger piece of watercolor paper. You could do this with a canvas or paper, whatever your choice. The first thing that you want to do is you want to have a grid drawn onto this paper. You can maybe see that I have already a small grid on here that's printed as part of this image, but you could certainly just draw the lines yourself with a ruler and a pencil. This happens to be a 1-inch grid on here, and if I can give you one tip or one thing that will help you is know the size that you're coming from and the size of paper that you're going to, because it will be much more helpful to you if there is a mathematical proportionality to the amount of squares that you allow here. So in this case, this is like, I don't know, 8 across and I think 11 high. You want that to correlate with your paper. So in other words, let's say I want to double the size of this. If I have 8 squares here that are 1 inch and I want to double this, I'm going to want to do 2-inch squares onto my real paper, but I still need room for 8 of them. Sorry, 8 2-inch squares means I need 16 inches of space across here. And the same thing this way. If this is 11 inches high, I need paper that's at least 22 inches tall. So it will help you to know your final size of paper first, because what if you have too many squares here and you can't fit them there? And guess what? That happened to me a little bit, so I'm going to show you how to make an adjustment if you accidentally kind of do the wrong number of squares, okay? So here, let's get started. I have with me a T-square ruler. It's really helpful to have one of these because it will make sure that your lines are perpendicular to either this edge or the long edge, because you can just stack your T-square right up there and you have a perfectly perpendicular grid that you'll be forming. And I'm also using a pencil with an eraser. So I won't need to draw these lines because they're already here, but just so that you know the process, what you will do is use your square and determine ahead of time whether you want 1 inch or 2 inch or whatever size you want your grid to be. And you're going to mark a little dot at each one of the marks. So in my case, at each one of the 1-inch marks, I would place a dot here, and also dots going across this way. And then I would line up my ruler on each one of these dots that I placed and draw the line across. Okay, and then I'm going to line up my ruler along each one of these 1-inch dots and draw my line there. Hopefully that makes sense. But basically you're just drawing a grid on top of your image. Now your image could be like I have, where it's an outline, or you can do this right on a photograph. Just maybe print a copy of your photograph so that you can draw directly on it. You don't want to draw on a good photograph, okay? All right, so that is step 1, is you have gridded out this. The next step is you're going to need to grid out your big paper. So let me get my big paper and show you how that looks. Okay, here's my larger paper, and I have already drawn the grid onto this. Just so that you don't have to spend all that time watching me draw a grid. This is 12 by 16 inch paper. Now, this is kind of a good thing that has happened, because the size that I have originally and the size of this paper, I did not plan well enough to make them coincide exactly. So you might see that this bottom row here is slightly smaller. These are 1.5 inch squares on this grid, whereas these were 1 inch. So I am enlarging this by, what is that, 50%. So going from 1 inch to 1.5 inch. So this last row is slightly smaller. So sometimes that might, if that happens, you just make a little bit of an adjustment, okay? So in my case, there is less interest happening down here at the bottom of my image than there is up at the top. So as I draw this, I'm going to maybe shorten the height of these vases just a little bit so that they fit on my grid. You'll see what I mean in a minute when we get started here. So just as a review, the same thing we did on the image, you're going to go down or across the page. I guess I'll do that first. I'm sorry, we have a little glare there. That's the trouble with having lights in the studio. Things always glare. But I'm going to put a dot all across the page at 1.5 inch intervals. And I'm going to put dots up the height of the page at 1.5 inch intervals. And then making sure to use a T-square because it's just way easier. I can line the T-square up, making sure it's hooked right at the top here so that it will be a nice even vertical. And I just draw the lines down each one. Okay, and then I draw across. So now I've got my whole setup here. The next thing that you have to do is coming back to this, you want to put some numbers on here. So let me zoom in closer and you can see what I'm doing. All right, what we want to have is we want to have each one of these little individual squares will have a name, we'll have a number, name and number, kind of like the game Battleship, if you know, like A, 32 or B, 14. Okay, so we're going to number these. So starting at the top in this first row, this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'm going to stop at 11 because there's really nothing in my row 12 here at all. And I'm going to eliminate that, and I may even shorten up this one as I was saying on my drawing. Okay, now I need to name these that go across like this. So this will be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. So if I said to you, I need you to draw 10D, you would find 10, you would find D, and you would go up in there, and here is your square on 10D. Let's zoom in. 10D, this one, is a very easy square to draw. It has a little bitty line here and a little bitty line there. As you draw each one of these squares, you want to make sure that you're watching where does this line right here intersect on my square of the grid. So here at this exact point, is it at the halfway? No, this is the halfway. It's probably about a quarter of the way across here. And then at the top, where does it intersect? Is it at the halfway? No. Is it at the quarter? No, it's a little bit less than that. Maybe it's like 1/8 of the way across. So just this doesn't have to be mathematically precise, but if you get close enough, you'll get a really good drawing. This guy right here is a little bit lower than halfway because maybe halfway up that square would be about here. And this little bitty line right there is going halfway, okay? So each one of these squares, you're going to draw what you see in it. Some of them are very easy, like this one, 9A. Sorry, let's move it up so you can see better. 9A. All you have to draw is this little line right here. Okay, and it's right close to the edge. Some of them will be more complex. So let's say we come in here and we're at 7E. Here comes E, here comes 7. So let me use a highlighter so that you can see better. This is 7E. There are a lot of things in there. Again, you do not have to be mathematically precise because this is poppies. It is not architecture. It's okay if it's slightly different than you know, what you draw is slightly different than this image because no one is going to see this. They're only going to see your final drawing. So you're going to take this piece by piece, section by section, and draw. And you can even, if you want to, you can skip all over. You can do this one over here, and then that one there, and this one down here. And by the time you're done, they'll all go together into this beautiful image. And it becomes a complete, excuse me, complete painting. And the last thing that you want to know before getting started is, of course, you want this new number system on your large paper too. Because how are you going to know where 7E is unless it's labeled on the big paper too? Remember, your big paper is your final piece, so these lines, hopefully you will have drawn them lightly enough that you can erase them later or paint over them if you're using acrylics. And when you add the numbers on here and the letters, you want to do them really either small and light or a combination, small and light. So exactly the same number system. I know you can't see very well, but I'm going to start here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And remember how I told you 11 just happened to work out to be a little bit shorter. So when I draw this bottom part in row 11, I'll probably just shorten up these spaces because I don't want my vase to be right at the bottom of the page. I want to lift it up a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of make my vases just be a little shorter. No, and it's all good. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing. You're going to do A, B, C, D all the way over to H on here. And then you begin your drawing. When you're all done and you have your drawing on here, that is the time for you to go back and erase all these numbers and letters that you've drawn. Erase any of these extra lines that you can get out of here now and have just as much of your drawing only showing as possible. And by the way, you get a lot of freebies on this particular drawing because if I say 9E, guess what? There's nothing to draw in 9E. So you get a break on some of these where there's really nothing in there. So it makes your life a little bit easier. And remember, just have fun with it. You don't have to worry about exactly having the same drawing as me or as your image. Just get something that looks like kind of like this, because after all, you're not going to hang this up next to your completed painting, so no one will know the difference. All right, happy gridding. Good luck. All right, here's my finished drawing. Now, this might happen to you. I found while I was drawing it that it got to be a little bit tedious, and sometimes I got a little lost, and I had to do things like cover up certain portions that I wasn't drawing because it was confusing. And some other things that I had to do was to fake it a little bit. So you do not have to have the exact same image here as what ends up here. So what I did, the adjustments I made were these. Like I told you, I took the vases up from the bottom a little bit, so they're a little shorter here than they kind of appear in that one. But overall, it's a good image. It's a good composition. I have my 4 main blossoms. I've got these 2 little pod things and some leafy stuff, and I feel pretty pleased with this. I think it's going to work out nicely, so don't beat yourself up if you do not get it exactly like this, because there were moments when I was so not frustrated, but it was tedious to continue doing exactly, and I've just kind of invented some of my own flowers a little bit. So if you're comfortable doing that, then do it. Make sure though that your stems follow in a natural line. So this one curves down, it crosses behind that guy, and it comes down and ends up in the vase. This one comes in. Okay, you want to make sure that your stems follow a nice natural curve and that you have as many stems in the vase as need to be for these flowers. So that's it. I hope you were successful, and I can't wait to see the painting that you come up with.